that ends our updates from the logistics cluster team. And now we are going to move to our fourth and our final panel discussion. As promised, we are moving west in the world now that it's a reasonable time to be awake, unlike when we started this morning. Andrew, I would like to invite you to come forward. Andrew Jackson will be our moderator. He has been in many different functions throughout WFP in his career, but currently he is serving as the head of supply chain based with the multi-country office in Barbados. So Andrew, I hand over to you to also introduce our panelists for this session.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julie, and good morning from Barbados. I hope everyone is keeping well and enjoying all of the discussions that's taking place today. So thank you, Julie. Yes, so I'm Andrew. I'm the head of supply chain for WFP's Caribbean multi-country office. So great to be with you today. Today, during this session, we're going to dive into the meeting reflections from Panama and Venezuela. So very excited to moderate this discussion. But really, it's the panel members who'll be sharing their reflections and what came out of that, and sort of what they're looking to take forward over the next into the next year. So let me introduce you to first of all to Javier from Hulo. He is the Colombia coordinator. And we also have from the World Food Programme, Vania, who is the Information Management Officer based in Venezuela, and Luis, who is the Logistics Cluster Coordinator also in Venezuela. So great to have you all on the call. So I think we'll jump into it and hear a little bit from your reflections. So maybe I can start, Javier, with yourself. So information sharing came up as a challenge, which you looked at addressing using both advocacy and collaboration. And I know that your meeting discussed creating a more harmonized and systematic approach for information sharing. So I think what we'd all really like to hear a little bit more about from you is how did the group envision these communication channels working, and what steps could be taken to ensure improved, timely, efficient coordination across all Latin America and Caribbean subregions?
Hi, Andrew, and hi, everyone. Thank you. That's a very good reflection that we did during our meeting some weeks ago. And the idea is that we need to strengthen the logistics working groups, the local logistics working group, because thanks to our logistics working group in Colombia, for example, we are working in a project together with the NRC and several INGOs and domestic NGOs working in how to solve some issues that all we have as logistics managers in terms of the quality of suppliers that we are having in our supply chains. And we have made, for this reason, a diagnosis, and we conclude that 60% of the participants of our project said that we need to improve our coordination mechanism and to do some efforts to share information, to share resources, to share assets, or all that we have now that is very scarce, because we are facing a moment that is motivating and that is encouraging to all the people to share. So for that reason, for example, we agreed with the regional and the national logistics working group, and we have launched 2 weeks ago an app from Hulo that is called Share Resources, that is for communicate, for improve the way in that we are communicating and to share resources, to see how we can share and coordinate actions and coordinate missions. And I think that talking with some regional advisors, the next steps is to support, even with the country directors, this kind of activities, this kind of projects to improve the way in that we are communicating and the way in that we are using technology for do it better.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Javier. And yeah, very exciting to hear about the app as well, to how that can link everyone and keep everybody informed. So it'd be great to hear how that develops, how it's rolled out, and how the uptake is. So thank you. So I'll come back to you, Javier, in a moment with a follow-up question. But I'm going to turn to Luis now. Again, Luis is the Logistics Cluster Coordinator in Venezuela. So Luis, a question for you is, again, on information sharing. I know it also featured quite strongly in your meetings in Caracas with your partners, particularly around sharing of resources, information around sharing of resources. Can you tell us about some of the strategies discussed to achieve this? I'd be very interested to hear how your approach is, how that looks like in comparison maybe with Colombia.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here today. Yeah, regarding the strategies. Well, I was listening to Javier, and we share some common issues, and it may sound like obvious when we say we need to share information in order to improve the operational efficiency. But sometimes, and most of the times, we forget that at least 60-70% of the general budget comes from supply chain, and that's where we need to focus on. If we save, let's say, $1 or $2 per metric ton, we will have a huge impact. We will have a huge impact, more than any other budget line. So we want to have this information. We need to collect, to systematize, to analyze this information in order to have not only to central level, but also to the on the ground level. So our strategy now is to have two channels, one at the central level that goes central level to underground level, but also between the staff that is on the ground, because that's where the operation is going. It's that's the important thing. So we realized this, and it was funny because I have an anecdote. We were sitting with 6-7 logisticians talking about logistics stuff, trucks, warehouses, and the thing is that someone came up with this issue about having a rate. He was paying around $500 for a specific route, and the guy next to him was, "What? I'm paying more than double. I'm paying $1,200." And these guys work in the same city. They have similar operations, and they are not sharing the information. And we realize that the information is staying on the central level. So we need to focus on that. We need to focus the relevant information needs to go down to on the ground level. So yes, that's that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting example there. And just drilling down a little bit, Luis, if I can, in that example with that partner, were you able to, sort of do some collaboration? Was that partner able to go back, maybe negotiate, or maybe piggyback on the contract that you had, and obviously had a much more favorable rate. How did that end up? Be really keen to know.
Well, that's exactly what happened. We start sharing the contract. Not most, but a couple of the partners are getting this piggyback operation with these same contracts and sharing some suppliers. So now the suppliers they know that we are sharing information. So now they are trying to adapt to our system, to our operation. They want to adapt their tariff frameworks to our operation. It's not that we are just hiring services. We are trying to improve the operation, sharing the information not only with the operational logisticians, but also with the operational managers from the private sector. So that's how we are working. That's our strategy for the next year, to start working more on the ground level, and hopefully we will have a better efficiency and reduce costs.
No, that's excellent to hear, and I know it's not always an easy conversation to have, in terms of rates and everything, but it's great that you've got that openness in Venezuela to have those discussions and to stretch the resources as far as you can. Okay, thank you, Luis, for that. So I think talking about the private sector, this was something that came up in both meeting locations, the role of the private sector. How can we work more effectively with private sector and suppliers as a way to address some of these challenges that we're facing? So maybe, Javier, I could turn to you to, maybe just get some ideas in terms of anything that came up on how we can promote strong partnerships between our world and private sector. How can we maybe raise awareness of logistics functions and our needs, and any effective ways that companies can contribute? So I'd really love to hear your thoughts around that, Javier.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, the private sector, as we know, can be a key actor in the future of logistics overall. In this moment when we have less and less resources from the donors, there is something to explore. The conclusions of the meeting, at least, are not very concrete in terms of how to do it. In terms of how we are doing in Colombia, for example, we have made several meetings taking into account not only the government but private sector to at least have to take them into account, at least in moments of crisis, to attend the emergencies and to have some logistics assets that we can use in a moment when we really need, in case of an emergency. But I think that is something, and that is a strategy that we need to develop together, not only in Colombia but in Latin America, and to know with what are the I think that we need to map a little bit how we can go to the private sector and to obtain some resources from them to collaborate with the current projects that we are developing.
Oh, that's great, Javier. And is there any specific, just to drill a little bit deeper, is there any specific partner or initiative that you're quite excited about, or that you think might have promise with where you're working? Is there anything that stands out, or is it still quite early?
No, maybe it's big supermarkets that that have presence in all the country have some foundations that can collaborate and so are very um, at least have the initiative to collaborate in a moment of crisis.
No, I like that, and something that definitely resonates in the Caribbean. I think you're aware, you know, we've had a very busy and active hurricane season that is still ongoing today as we speak, in fact. And I think, you know, one of the things that we've seen here has been the role of supermarkets, especially in small island developing states, supply chains that are very weak, that are not, let's say, the frequency of and availability of products is not always strong, but the role that they can play in sudden onsets with dynamic contracting, having some standby agreements, helping them, having a discussion on how they might be able to increase certain commodities that would be frequently used and having them in the region ready to respond. So that's quite exciting to hear that you're also looking at how supermarkets and their foundations can contribute. So yeah.
It can be very useful to work in some barriers that we have frequently when we try to flexibilize our procedures as at least being logistics managers. I was logistics manager like one year ago, and I had very important barriers in terms of how to proceed and how to convince to the donors in a moment of crisis that I had to contract in that way and to derogate and of course, we have a lot to do in terms of preparedness together as the humanitarian group to collaborate and to inform and to work with the donors in the best way to achieve some improvements in that way.
Thank you, Javier. That's very yeah, resonates greatly here for sure. Okay, so I'll move on to Luis. So a question for you, and very similar to the question that I gave to Javier. I know that in Venezuela, you also discussed the need for suppliers to gain an increased awareness about engaging with humanitarian emergency operations. So it would be good to hear from you if you could provide a bit more information on any solutions or ideas that your group discussed to address these needs, and what outcomes are you looking to achieve?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, and also Javier mentioned it, private sector is key for having an efficient operation. We already working with the private sector in order to improve this partnership. It's not about hiring the private sector. It's about evolving with them because they need to adapt to our structure, to our needs, to our requirements. So in order to do that, we're trying to involve them in not only the operation but also in workshops, so we can build capacities with them. Let's say we have this operation in this river transport operation in the east of the country, and we are trying to standardize the security levels, the operational structure, the tariff structure with them, so they can adapt to our requirements, and we are more efficient with the cost and time. We already reduced at least 30% of the operational costs just only by providing insightful information to the provider, so they can analyze better the routes and they can provide even better solutions. So it's really simple. It sounds really simple, but it's a lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of sharing information, because we also need to adapt to the private sector. They were working with another type of tariff structure, and we were working at the beginning with that, because that was the only alternative at that moment. But now, as the time passes, we are now evolving. We are having better operations along with the private sector. So yes, I think that's the win-win approach that we need to.
Thank you, Luis. So yeah, I mean, I think obviously that's quite an achievement, a 30% efficiency gain on cost. And yeah, I think definitely be very interested to hear a little bit more, if I could, just on sort of how you achieved that. Was it really just sort of sitting down, looking at the overall routing of deliveries, and I think you mentioned the cost methodology, so that's how you achieved it?
Yes, exactly. We were using two types of vessels instead of using the large vessel for the large operations. We established some prepositioning points in different sites, and by that we reduced the costs in 30% just by adding a preposition point. Of course, we analyze this information with the supplier and also with the rest of the partners, but it came from both sides, from the private sector and the humanitarian sector.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think we'll give you, Javier and Luis, just a break from talking. And I think what we'd like to do right now is just to open it up to any of the participants on the call to see if there are any questions.
Thanks, Andrew. There is one question there in the chat. It's from Annabella, who said that it's really interesting to hear about the idea of partnering with the supermarkets and the private sector. Are any of you familiar with similar initiatives that have taken place with pharmacy networks to alleviate the needs of essential medicines as well?
Okay, great question. Thank you, Annabella. Javier, would you like to come in? Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think that it's a good initiative that we had is from the Eco HIP in 2023. We achieved some funds for certification of the pharmacies, of some pharmacies, in order to comply with some requirements of the donors in terms of the QAMET. And that is something that is increasing the possibility to have some contracts with some big suppliers in the country, because another barrier that we have, because in terms of medicines, we try to import a lot, but it's a little bit difficult to do it. So we preferred to certificate the pharmacist in Colombia, and that is something, and that is like the first step to achieve looking to have a framework agreement in the future with that kind of suppliers. So it's important, and at least 20% of the participants of our projects have programs in health, and they are all the time buying some medicines, and it's very important, and it's something that we need to develop a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, Javier. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our session. Went very quickly. I just want to say a big thank you to Luis in Venezuela, Javier in Colombia, Thank you very much for your time and your thoughts and your experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Andrew.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
And
Thank you.
perhaps I can invite also Paula Robert in, who is the procurement sustainable specialist that we have on our team, because there was a few questions at the end of the last conversation, as well as one here. So Paula, maybe I give you one maximum 2 minutes here to address the comment from the last session, as well as the chat that's been happening now.
Hi, Julie. Sorry. Yeah, I think I was with my camera off. Sure. Which one were you talking about? Which question?
The question earlier at the end of Anne-Marie's presentation was in regards to, is there ways that we can, let me just go grab it. Sorry, that's the response there.
Is it, how do you
It was from
approach?
Pony Rose, and is what
Okay.
can we do for securing funding or partnership support for environmentally sustainable practice in procurement? And what strategies do you use to ensure these initiatives to remain financially viable in the long term with humanitarian operations? So I think there was a little bit of procurement chat here as well as this question.
Yeah.
So maybe we pull you in on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I would say there's different ways, yeah, definitely different ways to approach it, right? I think that in some instances, we're thinking that there's always going to have to be a cost increase. But as, you know, just with the example that Luis was also mentioning, it wasn't focusing necessarily on environmental sustainability, right? But there was an optimization on transport. And when you're optimizing your transport, you're not just reducing costs, but you're potentially also reducing your emissions, right? Which is your environmental impact. So I think what we need to kind of, you know, think more about is like the total cost of what we're purchasing in terms of a good or service, because there can be more opportunities than we think, and we might be doing more than what we're planning. So I think that was a great example that we shared, and also the example earlier from the previous panel in the morning about, you know, how you're also gaining some type of income by you know, managing in an efficient way the end of life of any materials that you have, right? And then that's always a source of income. So those are very creative ways also to you know, to find more funding. Of course, there are situations where you might need a higher investment at the beginning. So for example, if you're looking to solarize your warehouse, for example, you'll probably have a higher investment at the beginning, but in the long term, you're also going to have lower costs. So I think it's thinking more about how you can do it in the long term, which is quite challenging, you know, in an emergency context. But then that's also where, you know, the whole preparedness and prepositioning will come into play, and will help do that. So I hope that answers the question, or if not, happy to also have another chat.
Thanks, Paula. I think that starts to answer the question. And I think for those who are curious to learn more, I encourage them to reach out to the REC Coalition and all the team there, because I think there's a lot more that can be discussed there. So thank you very much, Paula, for jumping in on the last minute there. And that takes us to the end of our formal presentation and all of our speakers.